I never used to believe the stories about people disappearing in national parks. I thought they were just legends made bigger by the internet. I used to laugh when people talked about the woods being alive or watching you. I loved being alone in nature. I always felt peaceful in the silence of the trees, away from everything and everyone. That is why I went to Redwood Park that weekend. It was a solo trip, something I had done many times before. I packed light, brought enough food, and picked a campsite far from the usual crowd. I even left a note with my brother about where I would be, and when I planned to come back. I thought I was being careful. I thought I had nothing to worry about. The first night was quiet, just how I liked it. I set up my tent, lit a fire, and cooked a small meal. The woods were calm, no wind, no animals, nothing unusual. I stayed up late, staring into the fire, thinking about nothing in particular. But as I was crawling into my tent, I got this strange feeling, like I was being watched. It was not a strong feeling, more like a thought passing through. I shook it off. Redwood was a busy park, and maybe someone was nearby. I zipped up the tent and went to sleep, thinking it was all in my head. The second day was colder. A gray sky covered the forest and made everything look dull. I went for a short hike and tried to enjoy the stillness, but the feeling of being watched would not leave me. Every now and then I thought I heard something behind me, like footsteps on dry leaves. But when I turned around, there was nothing, just tall trees and empty paths. I told myself it was just squirrels or wind, but it did not sound like animals. It sounded like someone following me and stopping every time I looked. That night, I kept the fire burning longer than usual. The feeling had grown stronger, not just in the forest, but around my tent. I stayed up listening, eyes locked on the dark tree line. I could not see anything, but I felt it. Something was out there. I knew it. I could feel it breathing with the forest, hiding behind the trunks. The woods were not just quiet. They were holding their breath. I called my brother. I told him everything felt off, like the trees were hiding something. He laughed and told me I was just getting paranoid from being alone too long. He said I should come home early if I was feeling scared. I agreed, even though I did not want to admit I was actually afraid. I made plans to leave the next morning. I turned off my phone to save the battery and got into my tent, telling myself I would sleep and leave at sunrise. But I did not sleep. Not really. I kept hearing things. Not loud sounds, just soft movements, like something brushing against the tent or snapping a small twig. I kept thinking it was an animal, but animals do not walk in circles. I did not unzip the tent. I just stayed there, frozen, hoping it would go away. The next morning, I was exhausted and more afraid than I had ever been in my life. I got up, packed quickly, and decided to eat breakfast later, but something stopped me from moving forward. It was quiet again, too quiet. I looked around and realized something was wrong with the trees. They looked different, closer somehow. The path I had taken to get there was gone. I turned in circles, trying to retrace my steps, but every direction looked the same. No signs, no trail, just trees. I felt a tightness in my chest and tried not to panic. I took out my phone and turned it on. No signal. That is when I decided to call 911 anyway, just in case it worked. It did. I do not know how the call even connected, but someone picked up. I told the operator I was lost in Redwood Park. I tried to explain, but my voice was shaking. I told them I thought something was watching me. I said it out loud, finally, because I could feel it behind me. I knew it was there, and it had been there the whole time. The operator asked me to stay calm. They were trying to trace the call. I was talking, describing what I saw when I heard it. Breathing. Not mine. Not human. It was close, like something was standing just behind me. I turned around slowly, holding the phone to my ear, and I saw them. Eyes. Dozens of them. High up in the trees, like glowing orbs watching from above. I screamed. That is the last thing I remember saying, before the call went to static. I do not know how long I was out. Maybe minutes, maybe hours. But when I opened my eyes, I was lying in a clearing. My tent was gone. My gear was gone. My phone was still in my hand, but it was dead. I stood up, shaking, and started walking. I did not know where I was going. I just walked. After what felt like forever, I heard voices. Search and rescue. They found me, standing in the middle of the trees with nothing. I told them everything. I told them about the eyes and the feeling and the call. They looked at me like I was crazy. They said they had received a broken call from someone near that area, but when they got there, the only thing they found was a campsite, food still cooking over the fire, a tent perfectly set up, a phone lying next to the fire still connected, but no one was there. That was not my sight. I was found miles away from where I had camped. My ID was in my pocket, but nothing else matched. Not the gear, not the spot, not the time. It was like I had never been there, or like something had copied me. The ranger who talked to me asked if I was sure I had been alone. He said strange things happen sometimes. People get lost and do not remember. I told him I remembered everything. I remembered the eyes in the trees, the breathing, the way the forest bent around me like it was alive. He did not believe me. No one did. They sent me home and told me to rest, but I cannot rest. Now, when I close my eyes, I see those trees again. I feel them watching me from behind the walls. I do not go camping anymore. I do not even go near the woods. I know something followed me back. It never left the trees. It just moved closer. Every night when I sleep, I hear the breathing. I see the eyes. And I know one day I will disappear again. And this time, no one will ever find me. I always thought hiking alone would bring me peace. My name is Jason, and this happened when I was 17. I had always loved being outdoors, especially the quiet that came with walking through the woods. Whispering Pines National Park had been one of my favorite places since childhood. My parents were always okay with me going out there alone because I had grown up around those trails. I knew them like the back of my hand. But that all changed the day Sadie went missing. She was a year younger than me. We were not close friends, more like classmates who had been on a few school trips together. She had this curious smile, always asking weird questions like whether the trees could hear us talk. People thought it was just her being quirky. When the news broke that she had vanished during a solo hike, it did not feel real at first. She had texted her parents before disappearing. The text was simple but strange. She wrote, "I hear someone calling my name, but there is no one around." They found her phone 3 days later, still recording. That is when things started getting weird. Everyone in town was talking about it. The police said they were reviewing the audio, but rumors spread fast. One of the search and rescue guys who helped look for her told my friend's older brother something he should not have. He said the audio had whispers in it, her name over and over, growing louder and more frequent each hour, like something was getting closer. He said it gave him chills and he could not sleep right after hearing it. That alone should have been enough to keep me away, but I had to see it for myself. I do not know why. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was something deeper. But 1 week after she vanished, I went back to Whispering Pines alone. I told my parents I was going for a regular hike and packed my usual gear. I picked the same trail where she had gone missing. It was one of the quieter routes. Not many people liked it because of the long incline and how it cut deep into the forest. At first, everything felt normal. The wind was light. Birds chirped. I walked with music playing through one earbud and the other ear open for safety. About an hour in, I noticed the quiet. Not silence exactly, just a strange stillness. Like everything had paused. The air felt thicker somehow. I stopped and looked around. Nothing unusual, but I felt watched. I kept walking, brushing it off as nerves. But then, I began to notice something that made my stomach twist. Every few minutes, I would hear a branch snap behind me. Not loud, not close, but just enough to make me turn around. And nothing was ever there. I told myself it was animals. It had to be animals. Still, I stopped my music and kept walking in complete silence. My ears were open for any sound now. That is when I heard it. Very faint, like the breeze had a voice buried in it. It was saying a name, not mine. Sadie. I froze. It was just a whisper at first, but clear enough to make my chest tighten. I looked around and called out her name, half joking, hoping maybe someone else was nearby playing some sick prank. No response. The whispering stopped too. I tried to calm myself and kept walking. A few minutes later, I heard it again. Sadie. This time louder. Still far off, but no longer mixed with the wind. It was like it had its own source. I turned back. The trail behind me looked exactly the same, but the trees felt taller, closer together, like they were leaning in. I pulled out my phone to check my signal. No bars. Of course. I wanted to head back, but something pulled me forward. Not physically, just this feeling that I needed to keep going. So I did. I should not have. The trail bent into a thick patch of pine trees. The ground was soft and quiet under my boots. I walked slowly, listening. The whispers came more often now. Sadie, Sadie, Sadie. I began to sweat, even though it was not hot. My hands were shaking. I tried to turn around again, but I had lost track of how far in I had gone. That was when I saw it. At the base of a large pine tree was a phone, black, dirty, scratched up. I walked toward it. It looked just like the one in the pictures from the news. Her phone. It was still there, still on, still recording. I picked it up, and as soon as my fingers touched it, the whispers stopped. Not faded, not slowed. Stopped completely. I stood in dead silence, phone in my hand, afraid to move. Then something spoke. Not a whisper this time. It was a voice. Right behind me. Jason. My legs locked. My throat closed. It said my name. Not hers. Mine. Slowly I turned around. There was no one there. Just trees. But it did not feel empty. I could feel something in the air. Like it was watching me. Breathing with me. I dropped the phone and ran. I ran so hard I tripped twice. Scraped my arm and kept going. The whispers started again as I ran. But now they were not saying her name. They were saying mine. Over and over. Jason. Jason. Louder. Faster. I burst out of the tree line after what felt like hours and did not stop until I reached my car. I slammed the door and sat there shaking for almost 10 minutes before driving home. I never told anyone the full story. I said I got lost and panicked. No one questioned it. But I kept having dreams. The same one every night, for weeks. I am standing in those woods, and the trees are whispering. Then they open up, and there she is, Sadie, sitting at the base of that tree, smiling, her eyes wide, her lips moving, whispering my name. I wake up every time, just before she gets up, and I know, deep down, she is not lost. Not really. She is still there, still listening, still waiting for someone else to come looking. I think those woods take people, one voice at a time, calling their name until they answer. I just hope no one else hears theirs. Because once you do, it never stops. They say the forest never really forgets who walks through it. When I think about Glacier Ridge, that quiet stretch of evergreens up north, I still get chills. I used to be a seasonal ranger there, just like Caleb. He was the kind of guy who knew every inch of that place. Always calm, always reliable. The kind of man who would stop and help a turtle cross the path, or make coffee for the early hikers. But one night, everything changed. Caleb did not come back from his shift. What we found afterward still keeps me up at night. It started with the calls. Several visitors had reported strange howling noises from the deeper woods. Not the usual coyotes or owls. They said it sounded like something imitating animals, like a child playing pretend. Caleb offered to check it out. He was on the late shift, said he would take his body cam and head toward trail marker 12, where the reports had come from. That was around 6 in the evening. By 10, no one had heard from him. His radio had gone silent. I thought maybe the batteries had died, or he had gone off-grid a little, which was not unusual. Still, I had a bad feeling. The next morning, search and rescue teams went out. It took 3 days before we found Caleb's patrol truck parked neatly at the edge of the trail. Keys in the ignition. His thermos still warm, but there was no sign of him. No struggle. No prints nearby. Just quiet trees and damp ground. Then someone noticed his body cam had automatically uploaded some footage to the station's cloud system before it went offline. I was the one who watched it first. I wish I had not. The footage began normally. Caleb was walking the trail, talking to himself about how peaceful the night was. His flashlight beam moved steadily ahead, the woods around him still. He passed marker 12 and said he heard something to his left. That was when he noticed the footprints. At first, he thought they were from a large dog, but as he followed them, they changed. The prints were long, narrow, and deep. No heel, no toe definition, just sharp, indented lines like something had been dragged with precision. Caleb said quietly into the mic that it did not look like any animal he had seen before. The deeper he went, the quieter the woods became. Not just a little quiet, dead silent. Even the crickets and wind seemed to hold their breath. Caleb's breathing became louder in the footage. He was whispering now, saying he felt like he was being watched. His light caught something ahead, a shape moving between the trees. At first, I thought it was a bear, but the way it moved made my stomach turn. It was tall, unnaturally thin. The limbs were long and bent wrong, like elbows where knees should be. It moved fast, too fast. Caleb gasped, and the footage shook as he backed up, tripping over roots. He whispered something like, "No, no, no, I saw it. I saw it." Then came the final 10 seconds. The camera began to scramble, glitching in and out with sharp bursts of static. But in between, you could still see something. That thing. It was closer, just behind a tree. Then suddenly, in another spot. Then right in front of Caleb. Its face, or what looked like a face, was smooth, pale. No eyes, no mouth, just skin stretched over bone. It leaned toward the camera. Caleb screamed. Then the screen went black. After that, the investigation went cold. They searched for 2 more weeks. Nothing. No remains, no clothes, no more footprints. Just his truck and that video. We never found Caleb. The park filed it as a disappearance due to wildlife or exposure. But those of us who knew the woods, we knew better. Rangers started quitting. Hikers began avoiding the deeper trails. People whispered about Glacier Ridge, calling it cursed or haunted. I transferred out a month later. I still hear from other rangers in the area. Every now and then, they get reports of strange sounds. Something howling like an animal, but just a little wrong. And always near marker 12. Sometimes I wonder what it wants. Why it took Caleb. Why it let us find the video. Maybe it wanted to be seen. Maybe it was warning us. Or maybe it was hunting. I do not go near forests anymore. Not at night. Not even in daylight. If the wind gets too still. I hear the howling sometimes in dreams. And I see Caleb's last moment. The scream. The face. The way the forest closed around him like it had been waiting all along. If you ever find yourself hiking near Glacier Ridge and the woods go quiet, turn around. Do not follow the footprints. Do not look into the trees. And whatever you do, do not stop walking. They say Devil's Lookout Park takes someone every 10 years. I used to laugh at that when I was younger. Every small town has its ghost stories, and this one felt like the usual nonsense meant to scare tourists or keep teenagers from doing something stupid. But I cannot laugh anymore. Not after what happened to us. Not after what we saw. And not after what we left behind. It started as a normal weekend trip. There were 5 of us, old friends from high school, who had not seen each other in a while. We decided to hike up to the famous cliffside view at Devil's Lookout. It was known for its tall rock faces and misty trees. People said the view at the top was breathtaking, especially at sunset. We packed snacks, brought our cameras, and drove out early on a Saturday morning. Everyone was in good spirits. Emma had just gotten a new phone with a fancy camera, and she kept saying she was going to get the best photo of the trip. She was always the artistic one. The trail was quiet that day, strangely quiet. I remember noticing that there were no birds chirping, and the air felt heavier the deeper we went. At first, I thought I was just imagining it. We were laughing, talking, remembering dumb things we did in school. But even then, something felt slightly off, like we were being watched. I tried to ignore it. So did the others. But as we got closer to the top, the silence started to feel loud. When we reached the lookout, we all spread out to take pictures. Emma wandered off toward a narrow side path just past the cliff's edge. She said she saw wildflowers and wanted to get a shot with the valley in the background. I remember telling her to be careful. The ground looked a little soft from the rain a few days ago. She waved me off and smiled. That was the last time I saw her. We waited around for about 15 minutes before we started to call out for her. No answer. At first, we thought she was just taking her time or trying to play a prank. But after an hour, we started searching the woods. We split into pairs and kept yelling her name. The sun was going down fast, and panic started to creep in. I checked the path she had gone down. It ended in a small clearing with nothing but a few trees and rocks. No sign of Emma, no sign of struggle, nothing, just quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. We called the park rangers. They showed up an hour later and started a full search with dogs and flashlights. We stayed behind, feeling helpless and cold. When it got too dark, they asked us to head back to the station. I kept looking at the path where Emma had disappeared, hoping she would come walking out with that usual crooked smile of hers. But she never did. The next morning, they found something. Emma's phone. It was half buried in a patch of loose soil, just outside the clearing. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. The ranger handed it to me and asked if I wanted to try the passcode. I knew it. She had told me once as a joke because it was the same as her birthday. I unlocked it and opened the camera roll. There were a bunch of pictures of flowers and trees, nothing strange. But the last photo made my blood run cold. It was a selfie. Emma was smiling, holding the camera high, with the woods behind her. But there was something else in the photo. Someone was standing behind her, very close, too close. The figure was tall, but the face was wrong. It was like it had been smudged out, blurred, like something you would see in a broken mirror. No eyes, no mouth, just a smooth gray shape where a face should have been. And the way it stood behind Herod was like it had always been there, waiting. I dropped the phone. One of the rangers picked it up and looked at the photo. His face turned pale. He said he had heard stories about the park, a curse, a legend, how every 10 years someone goes missing and is never found. Most people thought it was just old folk tales, but he said he remembered a case from 10 years ago. A teenage boy disappeared near the same spot. His backpack was found in the dirt, and before that, in the early 80s, a woman vanished during a nature walk. Same area, always one person, every 10 years, never more, never less. We stayed in town for 2 more days, hoping, praying, but nothing turned up. No footprints, no clothing, not a single clue. Just that one image burned into my memory. Emma's smile, and that faceless thing behind her. It has been 3 years since that day. None of us talk about it anymore. We drifted apart after the trip, like the whole thing left a crack in our friendship. I still see them sometimes on social media, but nobody brings up Emma. It is like we are all pretending it never happened, trying to move on, trying to forget. But I cannot. A few weeks ago, I got curious. I looked up the park's history, and what I found chilled me even more. There were old newspaper articles going back decades. Every 10 years, someone went missing in Devil's Lookout Park. And not just that they were always in a group, and it was always the youngest one who vanished. Emma was the youngest in our group, just like the boy 10 years before, just like the woman before him. It is like the park chooses. I started writing this story because the date is coming up again, the 10-year mark. Another decade has passed. I know most people will not believe me. They will think I am just scared or still grieving. But I cannot stay quiet anymore. If you are planning to hike there, if you are thinking about visiting Devil's Lookout, do not. Just stay away, because that thing, whatever it is, it does not stop. It is patient, it waits, and it is always hungry. People always say nature is healing, that if you are feeling lost or stressed, you should go for a hike, breathe in fresh air, feel the earth beneath your feet, and you will return home feeling better. That is what Maya believed. She was always drawn to the woods, the silence, the shade, the sound of birds that made her feel small in a comforting way. I was not much of a hiker myself, but I loved her enough to follow her anywhere. So when she suggested we check out Carter Hollow Park, a place she read about in a Hidden Trails blog, I said yes, even though something about the name felt wrong to me. Hollow, empty, forgotten. The park was about an hour's drive from our apartment, tucked behind a rural town with barely any reception. The signs at the entrance were worn, and one of them had spray paint over the trail map. Maya said that just made it more exciting, like a secret waiting to be found. She laughed and grabbed my hand, pulling me forward while I stared at the words barely visible under the graffiti. Stay on the main trail. At first, it was peaceful. The trees were tall, standing still like guards watching us pass. The path was uneven, covered in fallen branches and patches of moss. Maya pointed out little things she loved: a squirrel peeking from behind a log, a patch of wild mushrooms, the way the wind made the leaves shimmer like coins. But after a while, I started to notice how quiet it had become. No birds, no rustling, just the sound of our footsteps and the occasional snap of a twig. I tried to shake it off, but every time I turned around, I thought I saw movement. Not animals, not people, just shapes behind the trees that vanished when I looked at them directly. Maya did not seem to notice. She walked ahead, humming a tune I did not recognize, as if the silence had not reached her ears at all. About an hour in, we reached a fork in the trail. One side was clearly marked, the dirt compacted and worn by years of hikers. The other was overgrown, nearly hidden behind low branches. Maya, of course, wanted to explore the hidden one. I hesitated. There was no marker, no indication that it was even part of the official path. But she was already stepping over the brush, calling back that we would not get lost and that it would be fun. I followed, trying to ignore the growing weight in my chest. The air felt different here, heavier, damp, like it had just rained, though the ground was dry. We walked in silence for a while, both of us more careful now. I began to hear footsteps that did not belong to either of us. I stopped a few times and looked back, but there was never anyone there, just trees and shadows. Eventually, the path opened into a small clearing. It was circular, perfectly so, and in the center stood a flat stone with strange carvings. Maya was fascinated. She knelt beside it, tracing the symbols with her fingers. I stayed near the edge of the clearing, watching the trees. That was when I realized there were footprints, dozens, maybe hundreds, bare feet pressed into the dirt, circling the stone, overlapping like people had been walking around it for years, but none of them were ours. The ground around us was undisturbed, as if we had floated into that space without touching anything. I called Maya's name, but she did not respond. She was staring at the stone, completely still, her hand frozen midair. I took a step toward her and felt the ground shift beneath my note. Like it gave way, but like it pulsed, like something beneath the surface had noticed me. I grabbed her arm and she blinked, like she had just woken from a dream. I told her we needed to leave, and for once, she did not argue. We retraced our steps, but nothing looked familiar. The trees were wrong. The light had changed. The trail we came in on was gone, swallowed up by roots and undergrowth. We walked in what we thought was the right direction, but the deeper we went, the more lost we felt, and the footsteps returned. Not ours. Soft, all around us. We would stop, and they would stop. We would walk, and they would follow. Maya whispered that she could feel them breathing behind her. I told her not to look back. We kept moving, holding hands so tightly my fingers went numb. It was getting dark when we finally saw a ranger's hut through the trees. Relief flooded me, but it lasted only a second. The building looked abandoned. The door was slightly open, swinging gently, though there was no wind. We stepped inside, and the temperature dropped. Dust hung in the air, and everything inside was covered in papers, chairs, even the radio on the desk. Maya picked up a map from the floor. It was a layout of the park, with red circles drawn around certain areas. One of them was labeled "Do Not Enter" in thick black marker. That was where we had been. We heard movement outside. Not footsteps this time. Breathing. Dozens of breaths surrounding the hut. Maya gripped my arm and whispered my name. I told her not to make a sound. The breathing grew louder. I closed my eyes and held her close. Then silence. When I opened my eyes, the hut was empty. Maya was gone. I searched for hours, screaming her name, running through the forest until I collapsed. I do not remember how I got out. I just remember waking up near the park entrance with scratches all over my arms and legs, my throat raw from screaming. They never found her. The rangers went back to the clearing and found only footprints, hundreds of them, bare, circling the stone. None of them matched ours. The trail was closed the next week. Locals say if you walk near that part of the park, you will hear footsteps behind you, soft and slow, like someone is following you barefoot. I go back every year hoping to find her, hoping to hear her voice among the whispers. But I never do. Only the footsteps, only the silence, only the hollow, where something waits for someone to step off the path again.